Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be diving into something pretty interesting. Uh, it's this question. Can large language models, or LLMs, as you might hear them, called reason, without us having to constantly, prompt them?
So when we say LLMs, think ChatGPT, but think much broader too.
Right, exactly.
We're talking about really powerful AI systems.
Yeah, and usually to get them to solve these, really complicated problems, we feed them examples or we give them, very specific instructions. Like, imagine giving somebody a cheat sheet for a test.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when we take away that cheat sheet right?
Yeah, that's a really fascinating question, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's kind of what we're going to be looking at in this deep dive.
There's some groundbreaking research that suggests LLMs might have these kind of hidden reasoning powers.
Ooh, interesting.
And these reasoning powers emerge when we change how we decode their output.
So it's like we have to change the way we listen or interpret what the AI is telling us.
Yeah, it's kind of like trying to find a secret message, but looking beyond the obvious.
I like that analogy. So what does this research actually tell us?
Well, one of the big things it highlights is that the standard way we decode the output of LLMs, it's called greedy decoding. It might actually be masking their ability to reason.
What is greedy decoding?
Greedy decoding is like always picking the most likely next word. So you just sort of follow the most obvious path.
I see.
And what the research is showing is that this might be making the LLMs seem less capable than they actually are.
Okay, so maybe they're smarter than we think they are, but we're not really seeing the full picture.
Exactly.
They give this really interesting example in the paper of a math problem about apples.
Oh, yeah.
And when they used this greedy decoding, the LLM got the answer wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But then they started looking at these alternative word choices, things that were maybe less likely.
Right.
And what they found was that a chain of thought emerged, a CoT,
Right.
that led to the correct answer.
It's like the LLM was taking these little detours to think things through.
And we just weren't noticing because we were so focused on the most obvious path.
Yeah, and it gets even more interesting because the model seems more confident in its answers when there is this chain of thought present.
So it's almost like it's saying, hold on, let me think this through.
Uh-huh.
And then it comes up with the right answer.
Exactly. And that's where this concept of call-he decoding comes in.
Tell me more about that.
Instead of just grabbing the most probable word right, they look at several of the top contenders.
Okay.
And by doing that, they're able to uncover these hidden reasoning paths.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So are you saying that LLMs are as smart as humans now?
Well, not quite yet. It's important to remember that this research doesn't mean LLMs are suddenly, on par with human intelligence.
Yeah.
But what it does show is that there's this real promise in areas like basic math and common sense reasoning.
Okay.
The more complex the task and sort of the more synthetic the task is, the less likely these paths are to appear naturally.
Got it. So there's still some limitations.
Yeah, there are.
But this is still pretty groundbreaking, right? It challenges this idea that LLMs need us to hold their hand through every step of a reasoning task.
Yeah, it suggests that maybe they have some intrinsic capacity for logical thought.
That's fascinating.
And it might be that by exploring different decoding methods, we can unlock it.
So maybe the key to unlocking the full potential of AI is not necessarily changing the models themselves.
Right.
It's changing how we listen to them.
Precisely.
That's incredible. It's
Right.
really making us rethink things, huh?
Absolutely. The researchers didn't stop there, though. They wanted to understand this better.
Okay.
So they dug deeper into their findings. And what they discovered was that by analyzing the probability distribution of these alternative word choices, they could actually pinpoint when the LLM was engaging in a chain of thought.
So they could tell when the LLM was actually thinking things through.
Yeah, basically the model seemed to become more certain of its final answer when it had gone through a CoT process.
Like it was double-checking its work or something.
In a way, yeah. And here's the thing. The researchers weren't actually modifying the model itself, its structure, or adding new information.
They're just changing how they were interpreting the output.
Right. It's like they were just listening to it differently. And it just underscores the potential of, exploring these unconventional approaches and questioning the things we think we already know.
So we need to think outside the box a little bit.
I think so, yeah. I mean, think about how we traditionally interact with LLMs, right? We give them these very specific prompts and instructions.
Step-by-step guides.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this new research, it kind of throws that out the window.
Interesting.
It suggests that maybe we've been limiting the capabilities of LLMs by assuming they needed all this explicit guidance.
So what if we gave them more freedom to figure things out on their own?
Right. What if instead of spoon-feeding them information, we just gave them the space to, explore and reason independently?
That's a pretty radical idea.
It is, but it's exciting too, right?
It is, it also makes me wonder, how do these cookies actually form what's happening within the LLM's architecture that enables this kind of reasoning?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's still early days, of course, but the researchers have a hypothesis.
What is it?
They think that the LLMs might be implicitly learning to perform a form of symbolic manipulation.
Symbolic manipulation?
Yeah, think of it like, moving variables around in an equation.
Okay.
They're not explicitly programmed to do this, but just through exposure to these massive data sets, they might be developing this ability.
Wow, so they're kind of learning by osmosis almost.
Yeah, in a way. And it's really fascinating because we're so used to thinking of LLMs as these statistical pattern matching machines.
Right.
But this research suggests that there might be something more going on, something akin to a rudimentary form of symbolic reasoning.
So they're not just matching patterns, they're actually understanding the relationships between things.
That's the idea, and it really opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
Lots to think about, huh?
Definitely, this paper, it really gives us a lot to ponder, I think.
Yeah, it seems like we've only just started to scratch the surface of what LLMs can really do.
The potential is huge. I mean, if we can, figure out how to refine these decoding methods even more, and maybe even tailor the architecture of LLMs to actually support these reasoning abilities.
Right, like build them specifically with this in mind.
Exactly. Then we
Yeah.
might be able to unlock some completely new applications for these models.
Stuff we haven't even thought of yet
Right, and it's a real paradigm shift, too.
in how we think about LLMs.
Yeah, moving away from this idea that we have to explicitly instruct them all the time.
And more towards creating an environment where they can reason on their own.
Exactly, like giving them the tools and the space to think independently.
That's pretty cool.
It is, and it's crucial that we keep investigating, the mechanisms behind how these CoTs actually form.
Like what's going on under the hood.
Exactly, because understanding that could give us some really valuable insights into the nature of AI itself.
Well, it's been a fascinating deep dive into the potential of LLMs to reason without prompts. And what we've learned is that there's a lot more to these models than we might have initially thought. This research suggests they have a hidden depth, a capacity for thought that goes beyond just recognizing patterns.
Right.
And by exploring these alternative decoding methods, we're starting to see a whole new side as AI, a future where machines might be able to exhibit a much more independent and nuanced form of intelligence.
And that's something worth getting excited about.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.